I'll call to order the Town of St. Andrews Committee of Council meeting. It's an electronic meeting on Monday, May 25th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Recording of attendance. I note that all members of council are in attendance this evening with the exception of Councillor Gumichel, I think. He's not arrived yet. He may join us later. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the seconder?
I second it.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji. If there aren't any questions about the agenda, all in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. I will now move to disclosure of conflict of interest in relation to any matter on the agenda this evening. Hearing none, we can move right in. There are no presentations this evening, so I'll move right to the introduction, consideration, and passing of bylaws and motions. And again, I should thank the members of the public that are following us this evening. And these motions and backgrounds that we're going to talk about tonight are merely to determine whether or not they're in a state that we will approve them to go forward for debate next week at the regular council meeting. So I will turn the floor over to Councillor Bishop, Finance and Administration.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. FA 200405B, dated May 25th, 2020. And the subject is an amendment number A-6 to bylaw number 18-04, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews respecting remuneration of members of the Town Council. This is the second reading. The background is, in 2019, the Town of St. Andrews Council directed staff to investigate a per-hour stipend for coverage of care services for council members during events and official functions. Staff conducted research into remuneration bylaws for municipalities across Canada. From the review of the bylaws, municipalities offer a range of stipend for care coverage for babysitting, but not for additional care coverage. The motion. Timeline. Motion 160-05/20, Amendment A-6 to Bylaw 18-01, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews respecting remuneration of members of the Town Council, first reading. Note, a public hearing of objections is not needed as this change is not significant to the bylaw. And the motion is that leave be granted for second reading of amendment number A-6 to bylaw number 18-04, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews respecting remuneration of members of the Town Council.
Okay, members of council, everyone okay with that to proceed to second reading next week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bishop. That one will proceed.
Okay, next item. FA 200501, dated May 20th, 2020. The subject is 2020 town budget, Town of St. Andrews amended budget. And the background, on May 11th, 2020, staff presented an amended 2020 projection/budget in response to the coronavirus pandemic currently facing us. Staff proposed a plan that included reducing expenses, canceling or deferring some capital projects, reduced revenue expectations, and a plan for increased spending due to sanitation needs. Staff did not rely on deficit spending or increased borrowing to manage the anticipated drop in revenue. In order to show its support of the plans, it is appropriate that Council accepts this document as the new budget for 2020. And the motion is that Council approves the amended budget that was presented on May 11th, 2020 as the official budget for the Town of St. Andrews.
Council? Any comment on that, or is that ready to go for debate and
Council
decision
approves
next?
the amended budget that was presented on May 11th, 2020 as the official budget for the town of St. Andrews.
Council, any comment on that, or is that ready to go for debate and
Council
decision
approves
next?
the amended budget that was presented on May 11th, 2020 as the official budget.
We're repeating here. Mr. Knopper, is that,
Does somebody have Facebook or something going on in their background?
Yeah, someone's streaming Facebook with volume.
Yeah, I have no, it's not on my end. I've got Facebook down on here.
I got nothing.
Okay, what would it look like on the screen? Because I don't know.
Paul, why don't you mute everybody but Councillor Bishop in the short term? And when she starts the next motion, we'll see if that clears it up.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the next item, FA 200502, May 20th, 2020. The subject is check signing authority. The background. The current signing authority with the Bank of Nova Scotia is mayor or deputy mayor and treasurer or accounting clerk. With the staff organizational structure changes, we should appoint the assistant treasurer as the other check signing officer. It is staff's recommendation to appoint Emily Nodden, assistant treasurer, as the second signing officer on behalf of staff. And the motion is, be it resolved that accounts in the name of the town of St. Andrews, hereinafter called the corporation, be kept at the Bank of Nova Scotia, hereinafter called the bank, and the mayor or deputy mayor, together with the chief administrative officer or assistant treasurer, are hereby authorized for and in the name of the corporation to sign, make, draw, accept, endorse, and deliver checks, promissory notes, bills of exchange, orders for the payment of money, and such agreements and instruments as may be necessary or useful in connection with the operation of the said accounts. That any one of the above mentioned officers is hereby authorized for and in the name of the corporation to endorse and transfer to the bank for deposit or discount with or collection by the bank, but for credit of the corporation only, checks, promissory notes, bills of exchange, orders for payment of money, and other instruments to arrange, settle, balance, and certify all books and accounts with the bank, and to sign receipts and vouchers. That a signature card for all accounts of the corporation shall be signed by the above mentioned officers, filed with the bank, and shall be in the following form: Doug Naish, Mayor, or Brad Henderson, Deputy Mayor, and Chris Spear, Acting Clerk, or Emily Nodden, Assistant Treasurer. That's the motion.
Just a moment. Sorry, Paul, can you open up council's mics again just so that anyone can speak?
For those that
Council,
I'm
I
asking
did
to
notice
unmute,
the
please
error
unmute.
on the motion with my title. I will correct that.
Okay, that was my comment, so that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Spear. Okay, everybody okay with that for next week? Thank you.
Thank you.
On.
Through you, your worship, just let you know, Kurt, Councillor Gummichel has joined us.
Okay, welcome, Councillor Gummichel.
I think he's frozen in time.
Yeah.
It's statue, Councillor Gummichel.
Yeah, your worship, the next item is PS 200305B, and the subject is Amendment A-4 to bylaw number 06-04, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews, respecting noise in the town of St. Andrews. The background, as suggested by our municipal lawyer, amendment number A4 to bylaw 06-04, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting noise in the town of St. Andrews. Timeline of the motions. Motion 161 on 0520. Amendment A4 to bylaw 06-04, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting noise in the town of St. Andrews, first reading. Note that a public hearing of objections is not required as this is not a significant change to the bylaw. The motion that leave be granted to move to second reading for amendment number A-4 to bylaw 06-04, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting noise in the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councillor Grew. Council, that one's okay. Any comments? Okay, seems fine.
Okay, moving on to the next one is PS 200306B. The subject is Amendment A-5 to bylaw 02-14, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting open air fires, second reading. As suggested by our municipal lawyer, amendment number A-5 to bylaw 02-14, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting open air fires. The motion timeline, again, we had motion 162 on the 5th 0520, amendment to bylaw number 02-14, a bylaw of the town of St. Andrews respecting open air fires, first reading. The motion is that leave be granted to move to second reading for amendment number A-5 to bylaw 02-14, a bylaw of the municipality of the town of St. Andrews respecting open air fires.
Okay, Council, everyone okay with that? Okay, that will move forward. Councillor Gumbashaw.
Through you, your worship, Councillor Gumashell still he's not on here with his mic or his screen. So if another councillor would do the honors.
I'll read that one. I'm just not, I'm not sure how an amendment to the Vehicular Traffic Act is, or traffic bylaw is recreation and community services.
Depends on who you talk to, Councillor Grew, but it seems quite fitting that you're reading it, so.
Okay, so this one here is RCS 200-402C, amendment number A1 to bylaw 18-01, regulate vehicular traffic in the town of St. Andrews, third reading. Amendment number A-1 to bylaw 18-01 is in relation to changes to section 19, offenses and penalties. The amendment changes can be found on document A-1, on the amendment document A-1 provided with this report. The following is a timeline for the development of amendments for bylaw 18-01, a bylaw to regulate vehicular traffic in the town of St. Andrews. Motion 104 on the 3rd 0320, amendment number A1 to bylaw 18-01, a bylaw to regulate vehicular traffic in the town of St. Andrews was given first reading. The next motion was motion 167 on 0520, amendment number A1 to bylaw 18-01, a bylaw to regulate vehicular traffic in the town of St. Andrews was given second reading. The motion that leave be granted to move to third and final reading for amendment number A-1 to bylaw 18-01 to regulate vehicular traffic in the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you, Councillor Grew. Council, everyone online with that? Any comments? We'll move forward with that one as well. Thank you, Councillor Grew. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. My first one is PED 2002-01E. And it's Amendment A7 to bylaw number Z2001, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number Z18-04 for rezoning 235 Water Street, and it's the third and final reading. The background of this one, the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission provided the town of St. Andrews with a report to amend bylaw number Z20-01, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number Z18-04 for rezoning 235 Water Street. The purpose of this rezoning is to build an extension onto a pre-existing building. And there's Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission reports provided in our package. And there's a bit of a timeline of motions. I may skip that if we're all good with that, but basically it's been through the hearing of objections and the first two readings. In fact, I think it did 2 hearing of objections, or had 2 of them scheduled at least, but COVID kind of interrupted. But we are now at the 3rd reading. So our motion will be that leave be granted to move to 3rd and final reading of Amendment A7 to bylaw number Z20-01, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 18-04 for rezoning 235 Water Street, subject to the terms and conditions that any exterior cladding used for the addition be in conformity with the definition of traditional building materials as defined in the Town of St. Andrews zoning bylaw Z18-04.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Council, any comments, or are we ready for that next week? Okay, looks like we are.
The second one I have is a new one. It's PED 2005-02, and it's a request from the Red Herring for an encroachment onto Market Square. The background is the owner of 211 Water Street, Kevin Simmons of the Red Herring Pub, is seeking permission from the Town of St. Andrews to expand the side deck along Market Square onto the red brick next to the current deck. The purpose of this encroachment request is to allow for extra seating by 4 to 5 tables to facilitate social distancing for the restaurant under the province of New Brunswick's mandated orders for COVID-19. Currently, under the COVID-19 rules, the Red Herring has lost the ability to seat 40+ patrons. The location of the proposed encroachment is on the lower half of the patio from the gate out approximately 10 feet and approximately 40 feet in length. And it ties back into the patio at the end approximately 10 feet. There is still a 3 to 4 foot walking path beside the suggested encroachment patio for walking space. To allow for ease of use of space, Mr. Simmons would like to use posts on footings with a rope at 4 foot heights between posts to separate the Market Square from the restaurant. This area would be removed each evening when the restaurant closes the deck area. Mr. Simmons is going to install plexiglass barriers between the current patio and encroachment area to create additional barriers to protect patrons. Within the potential encroachment area, Mr. Simmons would like to extend his liquor permit to this area if council permits. If the liquor permit area is not extended, this seating area will be for non-alcoholic drinks only. Additionally, Mr. Simmons is willing to work with town staff to accommodate the farmers market as they use the Market Square on Thursdays. And we have a letter from Mr. Simmons and photos of the potential encroachment area as well attached to our package. So the motion that we're putting forward is move that council approves a request by Kevin Simmons of 211 Water Street to encroach by 400 square feet with temporary barriers adjacent to the lower patio for the purpose of increasing the capacity of the restaurant under COVID-19 mandatory orders and under terms and conditions as set by the CAO.
Okay, council comments.
Your worship, if I may, just, this is
Yes,
just a
Mr.
small,
Spear.
well, it's right now, the way it's worded, it's actually a permanent encroachment. So if council wishes to provide a guideline of if it's only a temporary or something, it should be either amended tonight or amended at the meeting next week.
Is he seeking a permanent one or no?
Temporary.
Unknown, I don't think that was his intention, but the way it's worded, it kind of leaves it open to that.
Let's tighten it up a little bit and make it for a 1-year term, and then we can always renew it next year. Assuming council puts it through this year.
Right.
Could we, if we do put it through, could we be mindful that any tables on this encroachment should be on as far away from the walking path as possible. Because the plexiglass, it sounds like, will only be on the old patio. So we don't want the general public browsing by with a patron a foot away, basically.
But if you look at the diagram, that's what it shows. Is
So, but I
that,
think you'll have to have his tables push on the kind of the inside wall of this extension, so that there's a good gap on the outside.
Maybe we can debate that part of it next week. I agree with you, but the one thing that does seem to be missing, he mentions it in the body of in his letter, but do we not also have to approve the extension of his liquor license out to the encroached area?
yeah.
Actually, no.
No?
So if he, so, and that, I didn't know that question either. So we had a meeting with the liquor licensing board.
Okay.
And they explained the difference. And if he was doing it on his own land, we have no say in it. But through the encroachment, we're allowing him to go there. And then the reason he'd have to set up ropes and stuff is that is part of the liquor licensing, is that it's got to be a defined area. But we don't necessarily have to have the power right now if people stay within their license to say yay or nay to outside extensions like that.
Your worship,
Yes, Councillor Grimm.
I think it would be very beneficial if we have perhaps a second motion that says that the town of St. Andrews supports the extension of the liquor license. Just so that the liquor board knows that the town is supportive of that.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I twigged to that is that we have another motion coming along here where someone's asking us for exactly the same thing and asking for our permission.
May I say something?
Certainly.
It looks like he's asking for this because of the COVID-19 situation. So I would recommend that that we give him permission to do it for this for a 1-year period, and then we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll put this forward, and then we'll debate this, and we'll make those small changes that have been recommended, and we'll determine whether or not we need to, whether we want to give him permission to do it from a town point of view or an endorsement, because we'll move on to the next request and see whether that's materially different before.
Could Chris speak to as well? I believe the patio shuts down at a certain hour, which I assume would extend to this, the encroachment.
Right.
Yeah, and just before I jump in, I see Councillor Gumachel's trying to get our attention, so maybe I'll let him speak first.
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I had some technical difficulties. My Wi-Fi strength here on Water Street isn't quite what it was, given that we don't have fiber op. But that's another issue. So I apologize for being late. As to the market encroachment or the encroachment by the herring, I think we should put in something about Thursdays and the market. Like that needs to be considered as well.
Okay. I think that's a good point. We can debate that. We can put that in and talk about it next week.
Well, that wouldn't be part of the debate. It should be part of the wording that on Thursdays, like, I don't know, I went by the market last week and it certainly wasn't, it was not as big as it was, of course, last year. So I don't know if it's an issue. So perhaps we could talk with Mr. Simmons and the market and see if just on Thursdays, what compromise or what needs to be done, if anything.
In the background, Kurt, they are alive to that issue, and that he says he'll work with the town on that issue. And but I agree that the market obviously needs that space on Thursdays.
Okay, well, we'll put it in the motion and we'll determine it.
May I just make one other point?
Certainly.
The other point I'm looking at, when I look at the diagram, he's coming over quite a long ways there, and it says that there would be 3 to 4 feet walking path. Is that enough space for the public to be walking by without getting into too close to the patrons of that business?
Through you, your worship, I can touch light on that. There is enough space. I did talk with Mr. Simmons regarding this property and his ask. There is enough space with the tables pushed over and the plexiglass barrier that will be up, that there will still be 6 feet of separation between the patrons and the public. So the social distancing will still be maintained.
Thank you.
I think though, in general, and although definitely in this area, 4 feet will be good in one way, but it would have to be a one-way walk because you couldn't have people meet in the middle of it. But I hear right now from talking to people last weekend, it was a bit slapdash our whole downtown. Like there was very little social distancing, and especially in stores. So I think that's something we really have to start pushing, whether we hire people who are part of the clean team to actually go around and talk to people who aren't doing it nicely, you know, politely. But really, I think if you remind people, they'll do it. But if people just kind of fall back into I'm a tourist having fun, they probably will ignore these things. So I think we have to start really pushing it. And because I'd hate to see New Brunswick close down again in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Before we continue, worship, there's just one other thing I want to bring up. As earlier, Councillor Harrison talked about pushing those tables back closer to the deck, but that kind of goes against why he needs this separation between the tables, just so you're aware. I should ask council, Kevin's willing to come, or Mr. Simmons, to talk to council. Would you like him to do a short presentation before the meeting next week on this, or you think you've got enough information or can talk to him in person this week to make up your own minds?
I think we should have him come in if it's not too much trouble. Thank you.
Council, I favor that actually.
Okay, we'll reach out to Kevin. Thank you.
He's viewing online.
Okay, Kevin, you're invited.
Maybe he could draw us a little overhead diagram where the tables would be. That
Maybe
would
you could get a drone picture from somebody.
Nice.
Okay,
Are we
Councillor
ready for the
Harrison,
last one?
you're up again.
Okay, PEG 200503, McGuire Chocolate Company Limited, encroachment request. The owner of 212 Water Street, Mark McGuire, McGuire Chocolate Company Limited, is seeking permission from the town of St. Andrews to extend the liquor license to patio seating at the front and side of the property. All seating being requested for liquor license are within the property lines. Due to COVID-19 and the mandatory orders by the province of New Brunswick, interior seating has been limited due to social distancing. The ability to serve seating outdoors will encourage social distancing and increase the capacity of the customer served. Supporting documents, again, there's documents attached, a letter from Mark McGuire of this business and a top view of the property with seating. So the motion would be move that council approves the request by Mark McGuire of 211 Water Street to extend the liquor license to the patio seating at the front and side of the property and under terms and conditions set by the CAO.
Mr. Spear, how does this mesh with your recent information from the Liquor Licensing Board?
So I've had assurances from Mr. McGuire. He's just going to do this from for his normal operating hours, which is usually 9 to 10 o'clock at night. He does have to create this barrier, whether it's through ropes or a patio, which I'm sure he won't do a patio. We did find out between when this package was produced and Friday that actually he's completely within his rights, that he's not on, it doesn't require an encroachment agreement. It's kind of outside the sidewalk a little bit. So we had to get a measurement before we could get this, or after we got this package out to confirm. So as Councillor Grew had suggested maybe earlier, if you'd like to send a letter of support to the public safety to confirm or to support this, it might be helpful to Mr. McGuire. But right now he's got all rights to do what he's asking to do.
Right, so he's asked for our permission, but he doesn't need it, is what you're saying. So, but it seems like an enhancement to his business, and it will help with his distancing for his customers. So.
Your worship, if I could, I know we're going to talk about the downtown pilot project after, but It would be really good if we have a formal motion on that next week, that we put that before these requests. The simple reason being is these requests for encroachment, although it might be on his own property line, so not necessarily encroachment, but all these requests of extending patios and stuff, I think council would feel a lot better if they knew that we were going to be extending sidewalks and making more social distancing. Because right now it's already tight for people going both ways. So if we knew we were extending that, I think overall council might be a little more flexible than if we weren't extending it. So just thoughts, because even though it's on his own property, if he puts a table on his property line, it's still going to encroach on physical distancing on the sidewalk.
Right. Yeah, the two things go together. So I agree with you. Maybe we can organize it that way when we put the package together next week, provided that we're at that stage with that decision. Okay.
Your worship, Councillor Gomichel had a question.
Yes, Councillor Gomichel.
Through you, your worship, just for the CAO, if you could clarify, don't all tables on the front street have to have aren't they all encroaching on the town property? And wouldn't everyone who has tables out front need town permission?
Not necessarily, no. It depends where the property lines are. I was under the belief, but wrongly, that all the properties where the outside walls of the building were the property lines, but that's not necessarily the case. On some of the properties, the red bricks are actually on the property owner's property. But it certainly, as the deputy mayor said, it'd be worth maybe even a discussion with the BIA chamber about this, because it does create some issues about creating social distancing if we're crossing into paths and stuff. So it might be a larger discussion with the business as a whole.
Do the majority of properties encroach onto the red brick, or just a few or some?
I can't speak to that right now, just because I've looked and there's a few. The buildings actually, because in my mind, I always thought that all the buildings were even going down Water Street, but they do jut out a little bit in and out from each other. It's not real visible to the naked eye, but they're not all perfectly parallel. So some of them are on the property line and others have a little bit of the red brick in front of them before they get to the property line.
But that wouldn't be enough to set up tables and things. I was under the impression, I'm sorry, perhaps wrongly, that all of the tables on the front street and all of the tent signs and whatnot were all run through town hall and all had permits and da-da-da-da. It's nobody has a right to do it. They have to ask.
Well, but the signs are different because they're signage bylaws in there. So that's a little bit of a different thing.
Signs are different. Okay, but tables. Anyhow, that's news to me. I didn't realize.
I guess really what we're
know more about that.
You have to look at
property by property basis, and I can look that up and provide more detailed to council, just who would apply, who would kind of have enough room and who wouldn't, if you like. May not be with this package, but by the end of the week we can get it together.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want anyone to think that I thought it wasn't warranted that they have tables out front. I just didn't realize that everybody wasn't being painted with the same brush, so to speak.
I'm going to spread that rumor, Councillor Gomichel.
Yeah.
Well, let's put this forward and we'll debate it next week and we'll have more information by then. Keep it on the docket. But I like the deputy mayor's idea of how we sequence these things if we get to that next week.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay,
That's it for me.
that's it. All right.
Actually, your worship, through
Yes.
you. Sorry, I think staff missed a background and motion report. Beyond the next item behind the McGuire's Chocolates, there actually is a request from Minister's Island that should be addressed regarding a food truck.
There's 3 under new business.
It's under new business.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry.
That's under new business, I believe. So, council, in sequence, we would be going to looking at the registers, but let's deal with new business first, if you don't agree, because we've got our followers watching now. There'll be some discussion there, which might be more interesting than the registers. So if that's okay with council, we'll go to the new business. And that the first order of new business is the request from Minister's Island. Mr. Spear, can you walk us through that, or who's best?
I can, but I don't know if the clerk wants to, or if you'd like me to go with it.
Go ahead, Chris. I'll be taking notes. So if you want to, I can fill in as we go.
Okay, so council, I've got an email from the executive director this week about, or last week, sorry, about the setting up of a food truck for Minister's Island. As you know, there's going to be a challenge this year, as with everywhere, in raising revenues. The season's going to get started late. They're going to have challenges in regards to how many people they can run through their houses or you know, the facilities there because of social distancing and stuff. And so one of the items that the board came up with was to allow a food truck, but they wanted, the location was to be on the Bar Road, Champlain Avenue. So it'd be down at the end of Champlain, just at the corner, you know, where it's on the lower side of Champlain where it attaches to the Bar Road. And so they need town's permission to use our land, and then they'd also have to be issued a peddler's permit, which it's kind of a little bit outside that bylaw, but be essentially that they've been advised that food trucks have been a contentious issue, but what they're saying is that they're outside the downtown plat and aren't really directly competing with the restaurants that are along Water Street and King Street. And so that is their request. They're asking for a bylaw exemption. I'm not sure if you need a bylaw exemption. It would probably be like a lease request on the property there with terms and conditions. And then support from council, I guess, because it would, staff at this point would be unwilling to issue a peddler's permit without support from council, just because of that. We've gone through this with other locals, by the way, in the past, and we turned down 2 or 3 requests in 2019 regarding the same exact thing. So it's may require a little more thought, but it's a little more of a unique situation. So I don't know if council wants to discuss it tonight or have us prepare a motion for debate next week.
As I read through this, may I speak? They're asking for Champlain Boulevard and Bar Road. They're also, as you go farther on into this next part of the document, they're asking for the gravel bar down at the bottom. That's what it looks like to me. Yeah, am I correct on that?
Yes, that's right. They're asking for 2 locations, or I believe it's either or. If you don't grant this one, will you grant this one?
Okay, okay, all right. Well, down at the bottom, if you had very many cars down there, it would be kind of crowded, I would think. It might be a great location, but might be a little bad for traffic congestion.
I would tend to agree. It's usually packed down there in the summer as it is, and having to cordon off a huge chunk for a food truck. Although it'd be great in some ways to have a vendor, but you know, it's already quite busy down there.
Yeah. And
it gets into the whole issue. Do we want to turn to that idea that we control the land? Is a whole different.
Yeah. Mr. Spear, that to me is the $64 question. The Natural Resources and DTI have said, no, that's our problem. Well, you know, there must be a political boundary between St. Andrews and Shamcook. I'd like to know whether it's at the end of our pavement or where the water comes over the bar, right? I mean, I've always assumed in the last 4 years that was Shamcook, and that would be the provincial government's responsibility.
Yeah. 64 wouldn't pay for one of those potholes.
Your worship, if I could on a higher level though, like, you know, we could figure out operational plans on how it could or could not happen, but we've had a couple of different requests in the past, and these requests were made in high tourism years where there was a lot of visitors, and this council made a decision not to allow them, and to go back now after other people have asked and allow another user group to use it on a year in which tourism will be a lot slower and more restaurants are going to have trouble paying their bills. It just seems inconsistent to me as a council to consider this option when we denied them when tourism was great in 2019.
Just another comment. It seems to me there might be a problem with our bylaw. It's an old bylaw, and does it actually cover the Shamcook area as being even, you know, that's a residential area. Is it really an area that our current bylaw contemplates that kind of a business? Even if we were just to, I don't know. I looked at it, but it seems like
It's certainly a gray area, Your Worship. Mr. Nopper and I looked at it and we didn't think it fell neatly in, certainly. But this is the first request for anything outside the town plat for this
Right.
type of license.
So maybe the question is that, you know, this is not the place to debate this tonight, I don't think. I think probably if we create the motions that they're requesting and then we turn this to debate next week, they do deserve an answer fairly quickly, but by next week, I think we can debate this and come to a decision. Everybody
Councillor
okay with
Gouverchel.
that, or is that?
Yeah, Councillor Gouverchel has a request, Your Worship.
Thank you. Just
Councillor
wondered, did
Gouverchel?
they buy the, I didn't see it in there. Have they already got the truck or?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, they already
Yes.
have the truck. They got it last fall.
They're using it on island.
It's just important to note that the previous request that we had for food trucks, we didn't even grant a motion. We just
Right.
said that it goes against what we were allowing and we never brought it forward. We never gave them any options, and now we're saying that we'll bring a motion forward. It's just a little inconsistent. I know of a young guy who works downtown in the bars that never had an opportunity to even have a motion before council.
Okay, council, what's your thought on it?
I concur with what the deputy mayor is saying. It seems quite inconsistent when we haven't allowed it in the past.
I agree with the deputy mayor is we have to have a consistent approach with everybody. And in the past, we didn't I don't see the reason to do it now.
Okay, I'm fine with that. If council believes that we can just simply say no and send them a letter without bringing it before, and
I'm fine with that too, but I think it's something we really should tackle, and maybe this is the time to do it. But the other thing we really need to deal with is this piece of land, because the land would give us a substantial amount of control over what is a rather large tourist asset in our vicinity. And so maybe we shouldn't just shake our head and say not ours, play hot potato with it. Maybe we should actually consider there may be some opportunity in taking over that land at the bottom of the bar, even though we may have to fix it up every season. But I think that's something we really have to deal with. We don't have to pave it, but you know, filling a few potholes may not be bad if we get control over access in those areas.
I don't see that it would give us as a town any benefit at all. It's a cost. All it is a cost center. It would cost us money to fix it, to no benefit for the town at all.
Perhaps
But I
even-
mean, if it's not ours, then what if there are 3 food trucks there next weekend? Because we don't control it.
It's not ours. It's just like the clam digger. We don't control the clam digger.
the fundamental
but the
question
plan
is,
is
is it
not, like, in our town
or is it in
really
Shamcook, right? That's
It's in Shamcook.
well, that's
Through you, Your Worship.
somebody better tell the provincial government that it's their responsibility then. They just sent us letters saying it isn't, or sent letters to Minister's Island saying that isn't their responsibility. So,
Also, if that land belongs to the province and it's not the town's land, they need to fix it up down there.
that's why they're saying it's our land.
Yes,
I
of
would
course.
still, I would think it'd be worthwhile just to get our guys to price out what does it cost to fill a few potholes every year, and just cost it out, because it's valuable to, I know, the people of the town. Like, you go down there any nice weekend, even in the winter, there's a ton of cars down there and people walking. Like, it really is the entrance to one of our biggest assets in this town. So just throwing it away, saying, oh, costs too much, let's find out what it costs. Let's see what it costs to fill a few potholes every year, and then and then make the decision.
I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem doing that. We'll do that after we find out it's in town.
Yeah, but we may want it in town if it's not a high price.
But we can't just want it in town, because
Well,
then we
I say
fix
we
it
put a
up and
vote on
somebody
it.
else will say
Why
it's
don't we
not.
do a
in town.
vote then, and just see if the majority of council wants to at least price out what this would cost.
Fine, well then you're back to my point of putting motions before council next week.
Well, nothing to do with food trucks. Just looking at the issue of this land.
Your worship, just for that calculation, I would want to know what the erosion's like down there to make sure the town in 10 to 15 years doesn't have to tidy that shoreline up with more, like we have to do with the point. There's other costs that have to be considered as well with inheriting land on the water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we could get it for $1 if we really wanted it.
Well, it sounds like we can get it for free, but I mean, this is the thing. Well, why don't we find out what the costs are first?
Well,
and
the
then
other,
make it-
the other point, and if we're going to go that far, why not have Minister's Island as part of the town?
Well, because the province isn't wiping their hands of that.
No, the province is not wiping their hands. From what I saw, this is a junior analyst that came up with an opinion. I haven't seen anything from anyone in power to make that kind of decision. This is a junior analyst that came up with an opinion.
Yeah, but Councillor Grew, we've seen it every year that it's a hot potato. They would wipe their hands of this in a second.
Councillor
So all I'm
Gomashall's
saying is-
patiently waiting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Gomashall, I haven't got you on my
No
screen.
worries.
I can't see.
Thank you, Worship. I think Councillor Harrison's onto something with, Minister's Island is a significant asset to the town, and if we could work with them, if I'm not mistaken, don't we have some property to the right as you go down? There was some property that was donated to the town for a small park, and perhaps this
Correct.
might be an opportunity to develop that if Minister's Island was willing to fix that up, and perhaps there might be some room in there. But I find it a bit concerning that they already have. Did they have the food truck last year, or they just purchased it for this year? So I was over last year, but I didn't notice a food truck.
They had it last year.
Okay. Because if for no COVID, it's a little bit late in the game to be asking in terms of the season. And then a final note on food trucks. When it did come up in the past, we had talked about working on a policy. I know we did say no to the ones that came forward, but we had also pointed out that we needed to have a policy moving forward on and working with the local downtown businesses as to how we might deal with food trucks in the future, because it doesn't seem to be something that's going away. It seems to me in the past that if food vendors were affiliated with restaurants, they could get peddlers passes and things like that. But anyhow, I do think we should try to figure out a way perhaps to work with them, but I'm not sure that the location on Champlain Avenue is the best spot.
And your worship, if I could just add one more thing. If we were going to open up the town for food trucks, approving the first one that happened to ask at the right time wouldn't be the way to do it. I'd open up a call for proposals, so all the people that in the past have approached us have an equal opportunity at having a business in this community.
I certainly agree with that, and I agree that with Councillor Gumashall that we and with Mr. Spear, we need a policy first, and then we need to give everybody equal opportunity. But we are making concessions all the way down the line for people for reopening their businesses because of COVID. We're just about to deal with that downtown with our downtown business. So, you know, Minister's Island is a struggling business as well. You might want to say, and they're going to have problems with revenue, and I get all of that because of COVID. But this doesn't seem like something we can do on an ad hoc basis, or that we should do on an ad hoc basis. And again, you know, I think we parked the other issue about who owns the entrance to the bar. I think a separate issue. Hey, Council, what's
May I just say something,
certainly.
Mayor? I did mention last week that there is some structural work that needs to be done down there at the bottom because of the time and tides. And I don't know whether that would be an expensive investment or not, but someone needs to look into that because it does need to be fixed.
Whoever owns it should look into it.
Yes, whoever owns it. We don't know who owns it.
So through you, your worship, can I get clear direction from council? Do you want this on the agenda or not?
I'd like the land on the agenda, just so we can price it out. I think it's extraordinarily short-sighted of us to take this ha 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 who owns it kind of philosophy.
That's not the approach at all. You can't.
Well, you just laughed and said it.
You can't renovate something you ought to know that, Councillor Harrison. You can't spend money and renovate something you don't own.
I'm not saying we renovate it. I say we see how much it costs on a yearly basis to see if it's worthwhile to get.
Just to keep this moving along, if Councillor Harrison would like to F2 it and it's seconded by another councillor, we can add it to the agenda next week.
Like, do you F2 now, or you mean on the agenda?
You can F2 it. We've allowed F2s to happen at any given time. So if you're very passionate about something, you could make a motion and then it would be decided by the Greater Council next week. You just need it seconded by another councillor.
I mean, then I say we do a motion that the town investigate the annual costs in taking care of that land.
Nothing to do with the food truck.
Nothing to do with food trucks and nothing to do with actually wanting to own it, but we might as well know what it costs, even on a ballpark, which really typically isn't a motion. I think it's just something our engineers can do and look at and basically give us a quick answer.
There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second Councillor Harrison's motion to have to do that.
So we'll debate it next week if council wants to do that. That's all right through you, Your Worship.
That's fine. I have no problem with talking about it next week. And maybe in the interim, we won't have an assessment. We'll just determine whether or not and what that would cost.
Mm-hmm.
So the motion is
including the cost of the assessment.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Your Worship?
Yes.
Just for clarity, the motion is to investigate the cost of, I guess, ownership of that land.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, through you.
Yes.
Actually, I heard two different motions that came out. I thought Councillor Harrison was looking at the cost of maintaining the road, regardless of ownership. Now it's ownership's tied into it, so I guess.
Well, here's the thing: until we know what the costs of maintaining it are, I don't think we know whether we really want to own it or not.
Mr. Spear, I think maybe I'm wrong on this again. I should keep my nose out of this, but I think it was to investigate what would be the cost of maintaining it. And part of the cost of maintaining it is the cost of assessing how much it is going to cost to maintain it. That's not an insignificant part of our cost. I think it was to investigate what would be the cost of maintaining it. Correct.
Well, if you could break it down, I don't think we fill potholes all the time. I think we filled the ones down there before. So my motion is to actually see what it costs to maintain that little area. And it doesn't have to be a specific, 50-page engineering study, but I think we should at least get a good idea that we can talk about at council. I find sometimes we throw good ideas out, because we haven't really thought them through. And then a few years later, we wonder why we made a bad decision. So let's get all the information at our fingertips before we make the decision.
Fine, it's on the agenda for next week. Okay. What's next? Mr. Spear, the water and sewer.
Sure. So council, I guess this is kind of a staff directive based on some internal discussions among council, but long story short, with this pandemic that's hit us, of course, a lot of the businesses in town and some of the individuals are going to be suffering economically through loss of business or loss of employment. And unfortunately for the town of St. Andrews, we have very limited ways we can help each of the individuals. So we have no way to reduce property taxes mid-year. You know, once we set our mill rate in around Christmas time, then the property taxes have to go. So the only other significant thing that we can affect is water rates and user fees for things like the wharf and the arena and things like that. So before you, I guess I gave on Friday, is analysis of the various costs that would go there. And I don't know if you want me to go in a detailed dive of each of the scenarios, but essentially a couple of the businesses that are large volume have asked us about considering using the same water rates that we had last year, which basically was a carryover of the 2018 rates. And assuming volumes are down, that we could manage that on the budget that I prepared for you last year. But as I had mentioned, that we have a lot of capital that needs to be completed. And by doing that, we're going to again slow down our capital plans and defer projects indefinitely. Scenario 2 was using the new rates, but assuming so the businesses and homeowners would pay the new rates, but we assumed a 60% drop in consumption. And you could see that there's still a fairly high revenue there. So my third scenario, and this is just, the assistant treasurer and I playing with numbers just to give you something to think about, talked about reducing the base rate, so the infrastructure fee, the fixed rate, by 50%, then giving a 75-cent per $1,000 gallon decrease on the consumption rates. And those would only be for the larger user consumers. But then it doesn't say it there, but we also reduced the residential users that are on the flat fee by 10%. So everybody would benefit from a lower rates. Now, one thing I mentioned in my report that really the revenue for the spring billing is for usage that was before this COVID hit. So council could determine in their own mind if people should be paying or saving on consumption that happened before the pandemic. But of course, for most businesses, they're going to be paying it with current revenue. And then we just carry this over for a year. So if you'd want to do it next spring or next fall billing, if it's coming fall 2020, and then spring 2021, and then increase the rates to the full rates. So we just need to know, we've held on to the spring billings until we get direction from council on if you want to do anything with the utility rates or not. And it's actually sitting in our system ready to go. And if council decides they don't want to address this, we can get the bills out this week. But if they want to amend the schedules in the bylaw in order to adjust the billings, we can hold on to them a little bit longer and issue them in June. But in either case scenario, I guess we'd like direction, and as opposed to playing with numbers between now and July, it'd be nice to see if we could work this out by next Monday's meeting, so that we can work together as staff to come up with a schedule if council is going to give us direction, so we can get those bills out by mid-June.
Just one clarification before I turn it over to council. Are any of these scenarios, or which one of these scenarios is factored into the revised budget that we'll be voting on next week?
Well, scenario 1 was kind of the worst case scenario that I'd factored into the budget. And I'll be honest, I did the budget before I did this, so I was surprised that I was that close on the worst case scenario. But
So it's scenario 1 is the one that's already factored into the budget, the revised budget that we will be voting on next week.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay.
correct.
Okay, council. Questions for Mr. Spear? Comments?
And your worship, just to point it out, I mean, it isn't added to the agenda. So, and I'm okay with that if council doesn't want to address this at this time, but it means if there's, I guess we need direction one way or the other. If you want to proceed as is, it'd be good to know. If you need time to think about it, we can do that too. But the silence will be left for staff to consider that as moving forward as is.
And as is scenario 1?
As is would be scenario 2.
2. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
But
council's already
your budget
approved.
was scenario 1.
That's right. So the scenario 2 is the current rates in the current bylaw have the higher rates for the non-residential users. So that's scenario 2. Now I've assumed a 60% decrease in consumption.
Council, I think we should make a decision about this because all of the water bills and sewer bills are being held now, not being sent. Councillor Groom.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could just weigh in on this, there's a couple of things to consider. Number one is we have now delayed the collection, which gives the business owners some additional time to pay, get their feet on the ground and all that. The consumption, the water consumption is assumed to be 60% less than it was before. We did delay the implementation of the new rates by 1 year to give them a break there. And I think it's very important to realize that even with the increased rates, the large volume users are still paying considerably less than the residential users. The other thing that we need to consider is the utility fund is severely underfunded. Within 5 years, more than 50 cents of every dollar collected will go to service debt. We have to be mindful of that. We can't let that slip. So what I would suggest is we go with scenario 2, the 2020 rates, or greater. This is something we don't have a lot of flexibility on. We have a very large capital program that needs to be done. And if we give a break right now, we're going to have to do some pretty significant increases down the road to make up that slack.
In our current capital budget for the utility, could we knock off 200,000 in projects over the next 2 years? Because that's the difference between the 676 and the 874. Are there projects we could push down the road by 2 years and give them the break this year?
We can always defer, but again, as Councillor Grew's pointed out, we're underfunded and we're behind as it is. For 2020, Council approved on May the 11th a couple of the big projects, so there's nothing that can be deferred anymore. Staff had recommended some stuff, but we're kind of to the tail end of that. You approved tenders, and so that's an additional 200. Honestly, like I said, worst case scenario 1, I already worked it into the budget. But what that's going to mean is that we're going to be putting behind stuff next year. $200,000 worth of projects that we would have done next year are going to have to be delayed for another couple of years. And so it's the cycle that, we're trying to play catch up. And by doing this, and again, we did it last year too, for a different reason, but things just have to be getting pushed back and pushed back. But really, it's a question of, it's not as much what can happen to the utilities, what does council want to do for economic support to the community, if they want to do it. And some places are and some places aren't. I wanted to present it to you as a consideration, that's all, and not meant for me to have any pressure on you to follow one route or the other.
Chris, would it be possible for you to do both budgets? Like a budget if we chose one and a budget if we chose two? And then we could kind of compare them, and that way we could see both of them and then vote on one of them, I guess.
Your worship, just another point
Councillor.
I'd like to raise on this is, I really think it's very important that we go ahead, implement the 2020 rate, but if we are going to do a COVID rebate, if you would, or a COVID action, we still say, okay, we're implementing the 2020 rate, but here's a COVID relief package. So that way there, we are implementing the 2020 rate, and then next year when we come to it, we have the 2020 rate in place. If we go backwards to the 2019 rate, we're going to have an awfully hard time.
I do like that solution better, your worship. And then you can also open it up to all businesses in the town of St. Andrews that want to apply. Have it be they have to put plexiglass in or start some type of fund to make this a safer community for all versus just the 10 major users or whatever. It's important to note out of that list of 10 that we have, the 10 biggest users, is 4 of them, the revenue doesn't change. They still have the exact same amount of revenue. And then another 3 of them, their bill is less because they're using less water. There's only about 3 of them that really will have to use about the same amount of water and unfortunately probably have less revenue. So by giving a blanket rate change, some people are just, again, some of these people might even have I know one of them probably has their best year ever and we're going to give them a break. So it's just kind of all over the map. And I just think that Councillor Grew's idea, if we did want to do that, we could put a fund where they could apply for relief for having COVID measures that make it safer to do business in this community.
Has anyone asked for relief?
I know of one.
Oh,
Sorry, Worship.
go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I know of one that copied me in an email to the CAO, a major user that was looking for relief.
May I speak?
Certainly.
I think that it's a tough decision, but I think we have to go with scenario 2 because otherwise we're going backwards and backwards. And there's things that need to be fixed and upgraded, and I think we have to go forward.
Can I speak? I think that I agree with Councillor Bishop that, and with Councillor Grew, that we're always fighting this battle with the water. So I would agree we need to make a decision, and I would go with scenario 2.
Council?
I like the compromise the Councillor Grew proposed of implement the increase and then apply for some kind of rebate. I think that's a good compromise.
Mr. Spear, could you give us some, I think we go ahead. I think you give us some, can you give us some information about what kind of a package we could put together and for a possible COVID relief thing for the large users that believe they are suffering a loss? Because I think the Deputy Mayor is correct. Many of the larger users are government organizations that didn't get their revenue cut for the purposes that we'll be charging them for. Therefore, they are not likely to suffer if we charge them full price. And if they wish to apply, they may or may not get a rebate, right? But some others might, and they'll have to prove to us that there was a loss of business in order to get a rebate. I would assume in a COVID, you have to prove a loss.
Certainly, Your Worship, that staff can do that. There's just 2 points I'd like to make, although number 1 is right now the extra revenue is going to be the utility and usually economic developments in the general operating budget. So between the 2 funds, it's going to be a little bit hard how to do that, like where you're going to find the funding. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, and staff will work on it and try to determine what best way, and maybe it'll be something that we'll implement for this year for payout in 2021. That'll be part of this next year's budget, but that we can do that way everybody can go through their season and see how good or bad things were. The bigger concern might be, and I can talk to the particular user, was if people are willing to open up their records a little bit just so we can do some type of investigation, if you know what I mean. Businesses, but I guess the federal government, the provincial governments asked for it. So if they want it bad enough, they should be willing to open it up at least to a couple of people that can, after council has set what they feel is the criteria, then whether it's myself or an independent person can go in and have a review of the records and say, yeah, they qualify, yay or nay, and we can make an award based on that.
Aren't we a bit worried that the government users, what may just happen in a year is when all the budgets are being slashed, we're going to be remembered as the place that raised costs. So instead of SABS, it goes to Dartmouth, to their science place when they put new employees somewhere. Like, it's easy to say they don't lose money, but the federal budget's got to be cut back pretty harshly in the next few years. So I'd rather not be on the receiving end of that. Like
having
the
been
Harper
with the
years
federal
were not
government,
fine.
I don't think this won't even be a blip on the radar screen.
I don't think the federal government's been making too many cuts.
No.
In the next 2 years, I don't know.
Maybe
They're gonna pay
this
for
year
it.
they haven't.
No, but in the next few years, they're going to have to pay for all this
Yeah, but
money that's pushing around.
by far the biggest cost for the federal government is salaries. And if you compare salaries to the water rates, it's not even a blip on the radar screen.
But when they decide where to put people, they may have a bit sour taste in their mouth, is what I'm
No.
saying. Okay.
That doesn't even factor
You know
into the
everything.
decision.
Okay, guys, let's
Perhaps, Your Worship, we put it back to the users, then they can apply individually rather than deciding for the whole group. If somebody to postpone their
Right.
of the raise, they can write to us and we can discuss it.
right, and that's what I'm proposing. We're asking Mr. Spear to put together something that would be a reasonable package that we could make those decisions based on.
I did hear that some of the larger municipalities, I think the Halifax Regional municipality down in Nova Scotia was postponing their rates, and some other larger municipalities were postponing their rate increases with the water. So perhaps there's something to what Councillor Harrison was saying. And since we're a small place, we could, if there were, if people did want to get a rebate, we could discuss it and decide on a case-by-case basis, similar to what we do with the requests for funds each year for the.
But wouldn't we have to set up our budget for that right now, or we're going to have no room in the budget to do it?
Do what?
Well, this whole idea of a big fund to either give rebates or face shields or whatever we want to do. I mean, we seem to be talking a good game, but is that in the budget?
But we're talking moving forward these rebates into next year's budget, Councillor Harrison. So we can plan for it this year and then see what pot of money that council may want to consider, and that won't be paid out until 2021. Just one other thing, council, just, you know, right now we're just releasing the spring bills, but really for a lot of these, well, for the hoteliers and stuff, the accommodations, it's really the fall billing that's going to be the one that's going to be the rate. So if council gets more feedback from the business community or wants to look at it harder and adjust the fall rates in order to help business, we can look at it that time. That's really that billing that's going to have the bigger effect, not the spring billing. Because the volumes, you know, in the fall of 2020 will be significantly higher than what they've been over this winter for the spring billing.
Oh, as it stands now, what I'm hearing that we do is that we send out the spring billing at the 2020 rates.
Yeah.
Period.
Correct. Thank you, Jeff.
And by fall, we're in a position where we could create a rebate program if we wish to, and we would also still be in a position to take some action on what the rates are on the fall building if there was an overwhelming necessity to do that, and proof provided that those losses were suffered, or the loss of business was suffered by those particularly large users. Where we're at? Okay. Thank you, Council. What else have we got? That get us through the new business?
Through you, your worship, we have the downtown St. Andrews Street social distancing proposal left under new business.
Okay, sorry.
Is that the pilot project?
It's the pilot project.
Okay. Who's going to talk to us about that?
Chris,
It's kind of, well, I can, your worship. I didn't know if the deputy mayor would like to take that. No? Okay.
Well, I can, but you got, the proposal that you guys came up with was better than mine, so I think you guys should run with it.
Okay.
They're in, eh?
Mr.
Yeah.
Knopper, did you want to run with it? Would you like me to speak
go
on
ahead,
that as well?
go ahead, Mr. Spear. I'm going to keep taking notes here. So.
Okay. So council, one of the items that was discussed a couple of weeks, or I guess just last week, brought up by the deputy mayor is about closing off Water Street in order to make like a pedestrian walkway. There's lots of concerns about that. Some of the larger cities aren't particularly in favor of it. The businesses weren't, but we're a little bit smaller. It's probably more manageable, but we did talk to the businesses up and down the street. But one of our struggles is I think I counted 12 or 13 driveways that access Water Street, along the 4 or 5 blocks that we're talking of blocking off. And this was going to be a problem because you're going to have people at the barricades, potentially letting people in and out, or telling the residents that lived at those places they could only leave their houses like up to 7 o'clock in the morning or after 9 o'clock at night or something, just as an example. So staff came up with a secondary plan and presented it to a committee last Thursday that included the deputy mayor and Councillor Gumashal and the BIA president, Dale Chambers. But it was also given the approval by the Chamber of Commerce, their president, was that in lieu of cutting off the street, what we said we could do is that take away the parking on those blocks of Water Street. So essentially what we do would be to bring in Jersey barricades. We have several in town that are, that we've purchased for the triathlon that we could use, but we would have to spend, I think it was $3,000 more for the summer to essentially widen the sidewalks by putting these barricades on the outside of where the parking normally would be. So you'd have sidewalk, then you'd have another 8 feet where the parking lanes are supposed to be, that go the whole length of Water Street from Douglas Avenue up to, I think it was Elizabeth Street, the liquor store that we decided on. I can't remember if it was Elizabeth or Edward. But nonetheless, that was the overall plan. That way, we allow access by all the business or all the people with access onto Water Street. So whether they're residential or business, it would allow delivery trucks to still pull up the street, stop, unload, and get back in the trucks and get out of there. And then if it doesn't work, it also gives us a lot of flexibility to remove the barricades. And if the traffic didn't warrant it, or logistically there was problems with it, that we could undo it, so to speak, relatively fast. From everyone's look, it looked like probably the best route to go. Like I said, it extended the sidewalk. It would give, and council may want to discuss even at next week's meeting, having a policy about encroachment. Instead of going business by business, you might allow up to 8 or 10 feet in front of each business to put tables or racks or to have that kind of pedestrian feel. But that should leave a ton of room for people to get around and look at social distancing. Or I think that's about it in a nutshell. Maybe the deputy mayor or the clerk has more to add to that, but that is it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no,
Is
that was a good
Deputy
job.
Mayor?
That was a good job explaining. So yeah, it's been, I would say, overwhelming response from the businesses that would like to support this newer plan. The other plan, I think, definitely had majority consensus still of closing the entire road, believe it or not. But this plan has got a lot less risk with it. like deliveries, emergency vehicles. It's kind of the best of both worlds. The only thing I'm kind of concerned about is you see those trucks with the extended mirrors. And if you just had that barricade, are those going to jet out over the side? There's still a little bit of safety concern there, but overall, this plan, it certainly allows more spacing downtown for those that want to shop. It gives businesses a way to encroach. Because I don't know about you, if you spent any time downtown, but this weekend there was a lot of people, but I didn't feel like a lot of people were going in stores. They were just walking downtown, and they're still hesitant to step in businesses. So if you allowed a few of the businesses to put a rack of clothing or a table for just to have a coffee, whatever it might be, I think you're going to have a lot more dynamic of a shopping experience, encouraging people to interact with businesses. And most importantly, if you see 3 people coming the other way, you can step out around them safely, when today in downtown, you're not going to be able to.
Is it possible to have it all going one way so the trucks doing the deliveries can double park? Because right now, if a truck stops midway, it's going to block everything. Whereas if it's all going one way, you can have it like one lane for delivery trucks, and then everyone else uses the other lane if they're driving it.
I think that is possible, and I think that's preferable as well. I agree with that. It's an experiment that is just temporary.
Yeah.
The other thing Councillor Groom?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I would echo with, I would agree with Councillor Harrison. I think it would be much, much safer to make Water Street a one-way. I just shudder to think about 2 RVs trying to pass each other on Water Street and the barricades themselves form a psychological barrier, which will have the RV drivers crowding the center of the road. Right. And other things is, you know, there must be something we can do with these barricades, but to me, they look very unsightly. Maybe we could put some sort of a wrap around them or dress them up a bit. I don't know. The other issue I saw was some of the delivery drivers may have a problem going any distance with their dollies to deliver goods. If you have to go, you know, 100 feet to get to the Red Herring, delivering food on a dolly, the driver's not going to be a happy camper. The other thing is what do we do with bicycles in this scenario? Do the bicycles go on the sidewalk with the people?
By law, the bicycles are supposed to stick to the road anyway.
Or do they go on the, okay. So they're going to be on the road with the cars. So that may pose a challenge there.
Through you, Your Worship, just on that point, Councillor Giroux, we had a bit of discussion on where cyclists could go. They could still maintain within the crowd control barrier, and I know Councillor Gumichel was asking about that as well, and some spacing. And the way we intend to set up the barriers would be that they would still be almost a 3-way with a little bit of a narrow entrance to prevent cars from getting in, but still enough that cyclists could go through and people could still be safely using the sidewalk and the road without being interfering with the main one-way traffic.
Great. And my last point was in the formal communication plan, it would be, I think, beneficial if we had some sort of a public input. It could be put together very quickly, like say 6 o'clock on Monday night before the council meeting, have sort of a public awareness session or just to get their input so that we have consulted with the public, because it is a major change for everyone.
People love change.
Oh, people love change.
Yes.
I think that's a good idea, Councillor Giroux.
Well, I don't know. I think I'll have to remain mute. I'll put myself on mute on that one, Councillor Giroux.
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Gumichel has a question.
Thank you. As with anything new, this approach requires some compromise and also creative and ingenuitive thinking, being creative, thinking outside the box. I think It's easy to come up with all sorts of scenarios where this is going to be a problem. RVs, for example, should be directed away from Water Street anyway. That's what we've been trying to do for years. I think that it's a good compromise for now. I actually would prefer that the street be completely closed and just a pedestrian zone for those 2 months. But given that it's COVID and given all the other things going on, I think this is a good compromise, and staff worked hard to come up with it. I do find, I do take issue with the number of driveways in the 2 blocks downtown. I don't think there's quite 13. There might be 13 curbs, but there's not 13 driveways. So anyhow, moving forward, I think that that it's a good compromise, and it would would help make the downtown appear and seem to be safer for visitors who are coming. Because I know that last weekend it was quite crowded down here. Thank you.
Your worship, if I may, I think we need a formal motion for this, would we not, Mr. Spear? So I'd like to, I guess I'd like to F2 that we bring the downtown pilot project forward for the next council meeting for a vote. If I could have a seconder. And I just wanted to echo Councillor Gumachel's comments. This was a solution brought forward by staff. It really does take into consideration a lot of the major concerns with the plan. And the fact that our staff on their own came up with that speaks to the creativity, because the easiest thing for staff to do would be to say, let's not do this, because it's a lot more work for them. It's going to be a few headaches, but I think overall, our ultimate goal is to make St. Andrews and the downtown businesses succeed in the most challenging times, and arguably the history of our town as a tourism community. So the fact that staff stepped up to this challenge, I just want to recognize them for their efforts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I'd echo that, and just to address the concern that we haven't had public consultation, even though it's a major change. The BIA was consulted on this, and they went out to their membership, and so the BIA are the businesses downtown. I think that's who we're aiming to support here, not being able to necessarily drive to the post office.
And just one more comment, Your Worship, if I may, is I believe that staff did take this through the fire department and other emergency vehicles, and they much preferred this plan for the summer. Is that correct?
That would be correct. We had the fire chief in that discussed it with us.
Yep.
Your worship?
Yes.
I would like to second the deputy mayor's motion for putting this on the agenda for next week. I would like to add also that we perhaps put a public consultation, a public consultation session at 6 o'clock on Monday for the public to sort of voice their concerns and their input, that sort of thing. So I would have to have an F2, another person to vote for that as well.
I would second your F2 as well, just because no, the more transparent that we can be about this and gather input, the better off we are, because it is change, and change is sometimes hard to do, as we found out over the last 4 years.
Perhaps I would just unmute myself for one comment. I think it should be a presentation of what we're doing, not asking everyone on the face of the earth what we should do for the summer to start all over from square one. I think this is a plan that we're announcing to the public, and we will ask for some input. But this is like 50 people that walk to the medical center if we open the whole Pandora's box. Sorry, but this is about the business community and what we're doing to stimulate folks who've suffered the most in the pandemic. Anyway, yes.
Your worship, if I may, just as a quick follow-up on that. So the way this will look, at the advice of our solicitor, is that it'll actually be amendments to schedules of the vehicular bylaw. There's actually schedules there about no parking. So we'd say seasonal no parking on Water Street from A to B. And then there's a one-way street schedule. So it's just, if we're going to enforce this stuff, we really should have it in bylaw format. But it's only one reading where it's a schedule as opposed to 3 readings. Okay. So that instead of the wording will be by the bylaw, we'll make the background say that this is the proposal, but in order to do it, here's the technical steps to do it. Okay. And I'll just bring to your attention too is that we are working on a plan to look at alternative parking too. there are close to 70 spaces that'll be lost in the downtown. And we're hoping not to have to unload them onto the front of or, you know, all the short streets on the sides, or Queen, Montague and stuff. And so that'll be presented to council. You won't necessarily have to make a decision on it next week, but it'll be before you, and you might want to make a special meeting sometime in June for some of the recommendations. But so we're working on both simultaneously, because some of the public could be worrying about, if we've got 70 parking spots being taken away, are they going to end up on my front lawn?
Right.
May I ask a question? I had to leave for a moment. So are we just doing this for the summer months and into the early fall, or is this going to go on each summer, or how is this working?
Through your worship, it's a pilot project, so for right now it'll just be for this summer only. In my mind is, although because some of the businesses said the sooner rather than later, is July and August is the most important months for this particular.
Okay, thank you. The only parking lot that's nearby is the one behind the town hall. For people that have a problem walking a fair distance. That's just what I was noticing. I know that we're trying to alleviate things for the businesses, and I understand that, but for the citizens too, we have to sort of think about that a little bit.
Could we put the wheelchair one back on the slanty, you know, right by the bank? Are we moved it around? Are we allowed to move it back then and add a few wheelchair on the side streets?
Through you, your worship, I just want to point out, right across from the post office is a accessible parking spot on Water Street, as well as in front of the bank, as well as beside the post office, as well as beside the pharmacy. We have 4 accessible parking spots all within the center of town.
Won't 2 of those be gone though? Or at least one of those be gone?
Through you, your worship, our goal is to not eliminate the accessible parking. The barriers would actually sort of butt against those. So you would still have the accessible parking within the plan at this point. So accessible parking would still be maintained.
That's good.
Through your worship, if possible, I like Councillor Harrison's suggestion of adding more to the side, just because the flow of that lane of walking across, if you have a car in the middle of it, it's really going to be disruptive. And if you can put one right, like I wouldn't mind giving up a couple of those close ones for wheelchair accessibility or disability parking. I'd like to create some new ones and just keep the flow of that lane going throughout the course of the downtown.
Because we don't want to bottleneck it at the post, because that's the busiest place.
Mr. Spear, sorry, Councillor Harrison. Mr. Spear, isn't that just another schedule amendment for the?
That'd be correct, your worship. So
yeah.
I think next week everyone will have a hard look at it, and maybe staff will prepare a map block by block so we can tell what everything we're doing, but that would be 3 different schedules that have to be amended.
Right. Okay. Good.
Your worship, in the BIA meeting, there was some discussion of having a temporary drop-off pickup zone, like 20-minute parking at different spots down here at the corner to address Councillor Bishop's concerns. So a few spots designated for, 20-minute parking or 15 or something like that, like they do in other municipalities. Yeah. So those things would have to be in the motion.
Okay.
That would be important. Like if you went to a shop where you were getting a heavy item or something like that, you aren't able to walk with something that's really heavy for very far. So, yeah.
Your worship.
If I went to the hardware store or whatever.
Councillor Groom.
Thank you, your worship. Have we decided whether it's going to be one-way or two-way? I'm not sure.
I think
I have it as part of the discussion to move a motion to make it one way. Again, This is just, council can debate and not do that next week, but it is part of the process that staff will be going through.
I think, your worship, to Councillor Gru's point, if you make it one way, it's going to change the traffic patterns further down along the street. There's things we haven't thought of. staff would have to really think about that. If we make it one way, then where will people be turning up? How will that change the traffic patterns in other spots? And I think some of these issues were in the transportation plan and the presentation that we never quite got. But if you
I think staff will look at that before they bring the motions next week. That should be part of the background, how that happens.
Mhm.
Your worship, if I may, too, one last quick question.
Certainly.
A couple of people have suggested whether we should close off Market Square as well as parking spots so that it would be free of cars. And I don't know if you want that as part of the suggestion. I see a no from somebody and a yes from somebody else. So I'll throw that at you. We won't add it to the schedule, and maybe for the person who agrees with that, they can bring it up as an amendment next week, and to see that there's good things about it and bad things about it. It's easier for delivery. It could be open for delivery. It could also be an alternative location for more disabled parking lots or spaces, sorry, down there. But we were looking, there doesn't seem to be a lot of overnight. The last couple of nights we've checked through the weekdays, there's only been a couple of cars there in the really early morning. But that's just up there too, as a more pedestrian friendly zone at Market Square.
I think we add that as a discussion point for next week. Okay. That's it, except for the registers. I want to quickly go through those. I think we've dealt with a lot of it today, but Councillor Bishop, can we start with you?
Okay, I think we'll go to the 2020 ones unless there's anything that's in there in the earlier ones that anyone thinks we need to discuss.
Okay.
Mr. Knopper, Kiwanis Club of St. Andrews Campground deferral. What's that one regarding?
Through you, your worship, that was regarding some informal discussions with the Kiwanis Club prior to the campground actually opening. We haven't received a formal request, and at this point it will be hidden in the registers unless a formal request comes forward.
Okay. And the second one there, the water and wastewater discussion on vacant properties with no buildings and not using sewer and water.
Chris, do you want to field that?
Sure. Under the current bylaw council, any property in St. Andrews that has water and wastewater lines running by it is supposed to be being charged the rate. The practice has been in the past that any undeveloped lot, so that has never had a building or, it's still forest, doesn't have a charge. But if there has been a building lot on it, they are charged until they replace the building. But we've had a problem or an issue that's come up over the past little while is that there's been a few buildings that have gone down that the people are being charged water and sewer rates, and the buildings haven't gone up, or, they're holding on to the land. And so a case in point, one would be like the HMS old property where the apartment buildings were going to be. So that the garage was torn down, I think at the end of 2018. And so we've been charging, the property owner continued to charge her water and sewer rates, which is written in the bylaw and has been a past practice, but it's been unusual. But he's not alone. There's a handful of properties, I think 6 or 7, that fall under the same scenario. And we're just trying to get direction from council on what to do. It is a change to the bylaw. We wouldn't necessarily have to do it this meeting, but staff could informally withhold those payments until we can address it at a different time.
Okay.
And so, but I just need the direction if council feels that's important, or if we should just go back to the property owners and say that we consider it that you should still owe, or if it's like a staff report, I guess would be the other, just we can identify more and let you know more about it if that's how you feel.
Yeah, I would like to have a staff recommendation on this, and perhaps we could find out, it's not urgent, but maybe we can find out what they do elsewhere. I mean, is that unusual that we have a bylaw that says if you're not hooked up to the water and sewer, you pay for it anyway, even if you're not using any. If your
Yes, I
house is
think-
hooked up to it, I get it, but if there's no house, no use on the property.
We'll look that up, Your Worship. I think the original intent was that, say you had somebody demolish a building, then build it up takes 5 or 6 months to replace it, that people wouldn't be asking for to have their water bill allocated. But like I said, some of these properties have been going on for years now without basically any water usage, just a connection into the property. And so we'll have to look at that and see what's fair, but also what's easy to police and monitor too, that will
Right.
provide something and move forward.
Yeah, I
And-
think the Local Governance Act provides for that, but also I think the intent was to avoid having somebody put in a septic system or a well when
Right.
there's a water line going right by their house.
Right, exactly. That's kind of a different issue. We've
is.
already dealt with that. No septic systems if you can get water, right?
Yeah.
Also, it would be nice to know, what kind of a cost we would be giving away here if we changed it and acceded to that request, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't look like it would be astronomical, but we're trying to save as much money as we can in our water and sewer system right at the moment. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Councillor Bishop.
Thank you.
I guess I'm next.
Laura.
Okay, we have the police priorities 2020. I haven't heard anything more on that. I think that's pretty well gone away with this whole COVID thing, and
Yeah.
the same
Oh,
thing
I
with
have to
the
agree.
emergency communications agreement with the province. Nothing,
you will-
nothing new on that.
Mr. Spear? you
Nothing really
had
new.
some-
It has been delayed, Council, but they'll probably bring it back to us by late summer, early fall to look for whether we want to join that or not. So it hasn't gone away. It's just their staff has been allocated or relocated to different jobs, and so they haven't been as keen to move that forward.
Okay,
And the last one, the deer issue in St. Andrews, the deer are still here.
yeah, I asked to have that put back on just to flag it, because we're clearly, Deputy Mayor Henderson and I have both been involved in this to some extent from different angles, but I think what we need to know now that we are conscripted for probably another year as a council, it can't be just left like this. I'm being told that we will have another bumper crop of fawns in 4 weeks from now, and it's not going to get any better. So I think we need to have a discussion before we get too close to the next nuisance deer hunting season. It doesn't have to be this summer. So, but let's just agree that we will decide what we want to do, and part of that decision, I believe, should be we're not getting very much assistance from the provincial government, even though I maintain they're their deer, not ours. Do we have the wish to go ahead and do something about this ourselves, perhaps at our expense, and perhaps early in the next budget year? So it'll end up being a budget discussion in the fall. So that's all.
Your Worship, through you, Minister Holland did offer, once it's safe to do so, he offered to come down and meet with council to discuss options and share his views, which we've never done. We've never sat as a council with the minister for this government or the previous government. So I think that's a very nice offer for him to extend.
I think we need to do that as soon as possible.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So through you, Your Worship, should staff prepare a letter for your signature to sort of invite Minister Holland, hopefully over the summer, so we can plan for this upcoming fall in the season?
Sure.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Okay. So I guess I'm next. And the one that we have, the two new ones on the bottom from April 17th, 20, on-street parking in St. Andrews. Well, that's going to be an issue that's going to be dealt with staff regarding Water Street. Are we going to talk about parking on the other sides, or is there a plan?
We're working on a plan, Your Worship, and Councillor Hackagee, to bring forward. The plan itself will be included with this week's council package. We're still doing some measurements and some discussions with property owners, but there really isn't a mechanism to put it forward at the meeting next Monday, but it will be there for consideration. And it will tie into your decision on this pilot project too. You know, realizing that if you're moving these cars out of the downtown, we have to find alternative places to put them.
That's correct. Is there still, I know at one time we had parking only on one side or the north side, or, you know, is that still in effect, or is it no longer in effect?
I'm sorry, do you mean on certain streets?
Yeah, on certain streets, there was, you could only park on the north side or whatever. Is that still in effect?
I'll have to review the bylaw, but not all over the place. So some streets like Parr Street, there's no parking, but some of the streets like Edward, William, Princess Royal, Sophia, if you get down that far, people will start parking on both sides. And for the business district, it provides a bit of an issue because sometimes truck drivers will come down Montague and then turn down, like say William or Edward, to come down to Water and then make the turn. And if they have parking on both sides, it creates a real hazard for them to try to get their trucks turned. So we'll have to combine all that in our thoughts about how we're going to manage the parking and the one-way street, if that's the direction council goes.
Thank you. And then the last one is water rate discussion. We're in that process, so we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you.
Just through you, a number of the items on that register are pending the transportation plan. We've had the transportation plan, and I know it's COVID slowed everything down, but we still need to get those consultants to make their presentation to council at some point.
I agree with that, Councillor Goodmichel. I think that, again, it's another one of those things now that we've been put forward for probably another year as this council. We know the most about what's been done in the background of that, so I think we should find the time to go ahead and do something about it. That would be my view anyway.
It may be timely as well, because those fellows, those engineers, transportation engineers, might be able to speak to, you know, if you make it one way, they might have some input into the current plan. I don't know if they're working right now, but it might be a good time to pick up the phone and give them a call. I know everybody's busy, but
well, yeah, I think this is a pilot project for 2 months, but yes, you know, the more permanent decision making, that's there somewhere in the plan that we need to deal with at some point. So I would see us dealing with this in the fall, actually, this transportation plan.
well, I think we could certainly fire them send them this proposal as a, they could have a quick look at it, and any glaring things they might have some quick comments that would be helpful. They know the town and the traffic patterns from studying it last year.
The challenge with that is you send anything to a consultant that costs you money. They don't do
We
it
haven't
for
had our final presentation yet.
Yeah, but they won't do it you're asking them to do something beyond their scope of work. And they won't do it for free.
Chris, could you speak to that? Have they got their final paycheck?
Well, no, but
There you
back
go.
to Councillor Grew's point, though, it's a different question, and you know, I can have a quick discussion, but for them to provide a formal report, they're just not going to look at what we suggest and do it. They're going to do a little more studies, take time, and
I wasn't
4 to
suggesting.
6 weeks
sorry.
getting something formally back them. It's a good idea, Councillor, but
Look, I
we'll
wasn't
probably have to.
formal report. I was just saying if we fired them an email and asked them to have a look at it, they might get back to us. Many of the people we've worked with in the past are more than amenable to giving us suggestions, like the water consultants and they want to see us succeed, and I think the transportation planners want to see us succeed as well. So it doesn't cost anything to send them an email and say, given COVID, this is what we're planning. What do you think? They say it's going to cost us whatever, then we can say no, thank you. But I doubt they would say that.
Okay.
They often want to look good if they want to win the next contract.
And many other communities.
Mr. Spear will contact them.
Thank
Correct? Yep.
All right, you want to do business, tourism, heritage, and culture, your worship?
Yep, certainly.
Okay, so under 2020, the first two kind of tie together. So it's the archives operation of the courthouse and the future courthouse plan. So are they still presenting at the June meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll wait to discuss that one further after the presentation next week. The next one is the Passamaquoddy Lodge new facility. So there seems to be some interest. They have a consultant hired at the Passamaquoddy Lodge to potentially work with other levels of government to have a new Passamaquoddy Lodge. So I don't think we need to get much detail because I think all members of council would like to hear what that looks like and see what we can do as a town to make that a reality, because we know that that facility desperately needs an upgrade, and anything we can do, I'm sure that this council is willing to do. Is that safe to assume?
Yeah, that seems to be gaining some momentum. So
Yeah.
we will hear about that soon, I think.
It does. I do have an interview tomorrow with their consultant as well, just to let everybody know. So I'll let you guys know what that entails. The next one we already did, which was the Minister's Island request. And we also did the downtown St. Andrews Street social distancing proposal. So that just leaves Councillor Gumachel's annual rockweed harvest.
I think in discussions with the your worship, discussions with the CAO, I think that's something that we can put to our environmental committee.
Okay.
The environmental committee going, is it still, does it have a full complement?
Okay, good.
Mhm.
That seems like a good suggestion.
Is that not something we could also speak to Mike Holland on? Because wouldn't that be his jurisdiction? Because it seems to be one of our issues will be actually being able to do anything in that land. And if we're going to get his ear, we might as well get him for everything he's worth.
Is that fisheries?
Yeah, I think it would be fisheries, right?
Yeah.
That is
Federal
correct, Your Worship. That
jurisdiction.
much I've had the discussion with, and it's actually, the rockweed harvest itself is monitored by fisheries, but back to Councillor Harrison, the actual use of our beach may be energy and resource development. So it's two different departments monitoring the same thing, but overall, the harvest itself is actually through the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries.
I think the suggestion to put that to the environmental committee is good. And with that, your worship, in record time, that is the end of my register.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Gumachel.
Thank you. Trying to zoom as fast as the deputy mayor. For 20, let's see, trail and maintenance agreement. That's pending a meeting, which perhaps which may happen on Friday. Next, there was a designation accepted by BT Minister. I'm not sure what that one was, submitted by Chris.
We believe, sorry, just to back up a little bit, Councillor Gumachel. The top line there in the trail development maintenance agreement was taken care of this year with a grant authority. He did that in the May meeting. So that's done. The next line was just an error. That was the age-friendly community designation. That's been taken care of. So we noticed that, and we'll remove that from future registers.
So we'll be doing an official announcement at some point. Katie's Cove operating agreement, still working on that. The first reading of the vehicular traffic motion. I think it's we're on the second reading, aren't we?
Through you, Your Worship, actually, that one related back. So you're actually, Councillor Gumachel, you have no 2020 registers left. We cleared most of them off. This is actually a previous one that I have found that has actually been completed, and it will be hidden for the next registers.
Okay, so we'll strike that one. The next one was to the Environmental Committee, the declaration of a climate emergency, and finally, the request to use the wharf from Sales St. Andrews. I believe we gave the CAO discretion on that one.
Right.
So not as fast as Deputy Mayor, but pretty quick.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. I think mine boiled down to two, although it looks a lot longer, but we dealt with a lot of it tonight. I guess the first one, and we kind of spoke to it already about 5 minutes ago, the transportation plan. So to build on what the mayor said, it sounds like then we're going to try to get that in front of us for the fall to actually get the presentation done and push that forward, is what I'm hearing.
Yep, I'd like
So,
to,
I mean,
if council agrees.
yeah, no, it'd be good because I mean, assuming we are stuck here for another year, then, or I suppose it would be a year because this would be our last meeting, wouldn't it?
Yep. No,
Had things not gone to
yeah.
apocalypse. So yeah, so possibly the fall would be good. It'd still leave us 6 months or however long to actually implement some aspects of it. Then the rest of this, I believe, and I could, if staff want to correct me, we have their outline of a meeting schedule for the secondary plan, the municipal plan, and the zoning bylaw. And I think everything else in my area would probably fall into that scheduling issue, other than the things we already spoke about, like the red herring and those issues. So I'll throw it over to Paul or Chris.
No, you're right, Councillor. Everything falls within that discussion. And we actually had a meeting with the planners today in regard to the municipal plan process about how to continue with it. And our next meeting is, I don't have it in front of me, Paul, but I think it's after this meeting. So the
June 8th.
Yeah, June 8th, to go over the municipal plan and the secondary municipal plan to see if council's comfortable with the wording in that before we continue. And I believe the week after that, we're going to the zoning bylaw to have an informal discussion with council about that. Be the first time as a group you've met on that. And then we'll lay it out, but it's still looking like probably third reading of the zoning bylaw in conjunction with third reading of the secondary municipal plan. I think was the October meeting is where we were looking at tying it all up. It gave lots of room for further meetings of objections, and to be able to do public consultation. But we'll provide another report with where our thoughts are with the council package for your review, where we're thinking, and then we can either talk about it next week or another week.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Spear. All right, Mr. Knocker, do we have anyone with
Your Worship, before we go into that, I just had one more I wanted to add, a new one to the register. Again, I'd like to hear staff and council's thoughts. So the Seabreeze restaurant was wondering, in regards to COVID-19, they've switched their operation. It's a very small building. For those of you that know it, the old RCMP building, they literally, because of COVID-19, could only have a couple tables. So they've switched their business to be a takeout only restaurant. And what they've been doing is you probably see it in the evenings. People are kind of parking everywhere on the way into that parking lot. So what they were wondering is if the town would be willing to consider trading the back 2 parking spots that they have as part of their building for the front 2. So people can pull in, get their takeout and go in a safer format than pulling up to the side of it and in the entrance to the parking lot. They just figured it would be a better deal. And of course, if we have limited parking, it would be 2 spots in the main parking lot for maybe town staff to pull in if they have to drop something off of town hall because it's already reserved parking. So they were wondering if council would consider trading the 2 spots to help them basically survive COVID-19 under the current circumstances.
the 2 spots beside right beside the restaurant?
Yeah, so they've got the diagonal parking spots. I think they've got 2 up front. They're just saying, we'll give you our 2 and we can have those 2 because that's where cars seem to be pulling in, or they're stopping in the entranceway to the town parking lot, taking up half the entrance. So they would like to just put, this is the pickup spot. And then again, they understand they're not asking for anything free. They would give up their 2 at the back for the town to use.
Is this just for the COVID-19 or is it a permanent?
Yeah, this was just a temporary request to help make it smoother for people to get their deliveries and go.
Could this be something that we could deal with Mr. Spear? Could you deal with this and find out exactly what they want? Because it seems like an odd request, because not an odd request, but I understand what they're doing. They want those as reserved parking spots just for their restaurant.
Correct.
But in
Right,
effect,
on King Street,
mostly people parking there would be going into their restaurant anyway, probably.
It'll probably fill
Probably.
up quickly now, though, because if we're gonna block off Water Street parking, it's all like you know, in high summer, that's gonna be packed. And unless they can somehow block it off for their customers, which may be tough.
Yeah.
So I do see the advantage for the town as well. So say Mr. McMillan was pulling in with a public works truck, he could just pull into their reserve spots if he had to run into town hall. It's like 2 reserved town hall part because it's already painted on the road. So we could just implement those for town hall use.
Good idea.
Well, look,
I don't even know if we need to take anything from them. If we're giving other businesses encroachments, I don't have much of a problem giving them an encroachment over a parking spot.
True. They're offering it up though because they understand parking's pretty limited and we are restricting it further. So they offered the trade. I didn't bargain with them.
No,
I see no problem with it. It seems a straightforward arrangement.
I agree.
I
And
agree.
perhaps a sign could be, put in the front of it to say that it's parking for the restaurant. It's through their open hours.
They may be willing just to put parking, to your point, during the open hours, then we actually gain more parking spots as a result of this.
Right.
That's what I
Absolutely.
suggest.
Do we have to take this for a vote, or is it, this seems like something we should be able to administratively do?
Might be an
Mr.
amendment.
Spear, what do you think?
it's a good question. It's a good arrangement, but honestly, where it's on our streets, it's probably another amendment to the vehicle bylaw. I'll have to get some legal advice on that, how we do it. Believe me, I'll try to do it the absolute easiest way we can, but I'll have to see if we can just get into a written agreement
You're right.
about the use of it over a certain period of time, and that would be my preferred method of doing it. So that's what I'll ask first.
It's only temporary, I think.
Correct. It's just during COVID-19 to help their business get through it.
Right. But Mr. Spear is correct. We need to do it right to make sure we're not putting us in any liability. So
Sure.
we can get it to happen fairly soon because they're open, and hopefully that'll
Alleviate it.
by next week.
Your Worship, Councillor Gumichaud would like to speak.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Gumichaud, I didn't see it.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I know staff's very busy, but given all of our discussion here at committee about parking and downtown and traffic flow, I think it might be a good time to prepare some kind of a communication from Town Hall and Town Council through the DIA to all of the people downtown and all of the community to say that parking downtown is limited or should be limited during the summer months in support of the businesses. If you can walk downtown, please do. If you work downtown, please don't park out front of where you work for the whole day. And this has been going on for a number of years, which is why we push for the transportation plan in the first place. We have a real parking problem, and now if we're going to limit some of the parking, residents and businesses all have to give a little bit of extra consideration to where they're parking on a daily basis, out of consideration really for others. If you park out front of your business, it means that people in town maybe that have difficulty walking can't get there as easily or have to park further away, or if you just drive downtown and park where you need to be, you're blocking that from somebody who's maybe coming to spend money in town. So everybody needs to give a little more consideration to parking and do a little more walking and biking, and I think that should be something that we send out as part of a newsletter or through social media, those sorts of things.
Mr. Knopper, is our spring newsletter gone out yet? I know we were preparing something.
Through Your Worship, it hasn't yet, only because of some of the decisions and discussions that we are having now. So
Right.
I would rather send out a proper message when we've got our information ready to go, and we can do that very shortly.
Well, and next Monday, we'll hopefully be voting on and potentially passing this pilot project, which could be all trigger the same thing. So by next week, we could have this all as a package to go out to the public.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good suggestion, Councillor Gumichaud. All right. Mr. Knopper, are there any questions from our followers?
Through you, your worship, there are. I will also say, like we did last time, for council, we will respond to these questions within 24 to 48 hours. We had good response and feedback from the public when we did it this way. There are a series of questions and comments, so I tried to scale them down to mainly the questions. So the first question was from Joanne Carney. Are the wharf repairs and upgrades going forward as previously planned? Chris, if you want to speak to that, I believe it was within the budget that some of the budget changes.
Yes, there will be definitely some work done, but we thought we'd wait until the fall with all the challenges we have already. Adding construction crews to the downtown core to work on the wharf probably wouldn't be a great idea. So we're looking at that budget and probably start it in October.
Thank you. Kevin Simmons said he would speak to council, and we've already agreed with that. There were a couple of comments regarding the back and forth between yes closing the street and no closing the street. So I think there's been good discussion on that with council. I think we've cleared some of that. There were a couple of comments in regards to if there is a relief fund or something that can go towards businesses. A number of them are asking for support when it comes to PPE or, you know, a fund relief to go to purchasing plexiglass to help businesses. Scanning through here. One question from Joanne Carney asked, with the Canada Day celebrations being canceled, can that fund be used towards PPE and supporting local business? We had a couple of questions that were off of topic from tonight's meeting, but we'll address them accordingly when it comes to zoning and planning. But we did have this one posting, and it was from Ian McKee, sorry, and it's Dear Mayor Nation Council, warmest greetings from across the Atlantic and the town of Thorpe, St. Andrews, UK. Pleasure to join your meeting once again. We are delighted that you are making great progress out of the COVID-19 lockdown, and we wish you and the town every continued success. It has been an exemplar of community leadership. We have been thinking and praying for your community. We are so pleased that Hunter Henderson entered, I guess it's Friar James Stewart's Rainbow Challenge at Thorpe St. Andrews Parish Church. It's a real boost for our community knowing you are supporting and thinking of us as well. Hunter won the international category, so congratulations to Hunter.
All right.
And he was mentioned in our regional newspaper. Our primary school children of key workers have painted a display of Canadian-themed wildlife for a window display. I'd be delighted to hear from any community groups who would link up with our scouts, are even keen to write. So there's group connections there. And with our very best wishes and every continued success and safety to you and all of your residents of St. Andrews, Councillor Ian McKee, Community Goodwill Ambassador. Through you, your worship, I would suggest yourself, myself, or Deputy Mayor, we work on a wonderful response. They've provided a few in the past, and I think we need to provide something back in
Good plan. Good plan. That's great. And all right, Hunter.
Yeah, and in regards to Councillor Ian, also Reverend James Stewart, they're always talking about us and promoting our community over there in Thorpe St. Andrews. So they're definitely a great partner community and always help spreading cheer and thinking of us for sure.
Yeah, we need to reciprocate and line them up with. It's really become a community to community thing, not necessarily a local government to local government. Everybody's getting involved. I think that's great.
And so, did I win a trip to Thorpe St. Andrew? Did Hunter win one that we have to use by the end of the month?
I don't know. Maybe.
Gotta use it by the end of the month? Is that what's going on here?
No, Hunter's the one that's important over there. Maybe he'll take you along with him.
It's true. I probably wouldn't be his +1.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mr. Nomper. That was great. Excellent. Look, any last comments from council? If not, it's just a little over 2 hours like we tried to do. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
No move.
Councilor Akaji and a seconder?
I'll move.
Okay. I think we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Right. I have a question, Chris, if you have a minute.
Yeah, just hold on a second there. Let me stop everything here.
Okay. It's nothing to do with council.